Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're getting to something pretty heavy. We've got this stack of analysis documents, really detailed stuff, looking at 3 conflicts, all started by the same person, Cybergirl 10. Let's call her CG10. And what we're trying to do here, our main job, is to figure out who got hit the hardest, who faced the most, well, damaging and disrespectful treatment, and crucially, why. Why did CG10 handle these 3 situations so differently?
Yeah, the contrast is really striking, isn't it? It's like a snapshot of someone pushed way past their limits. And you see how they kind of allocate that anger. It's the difference between, say, a controlled strike and just a complete explosion.
Okay, so who are the targets? Let's lay them out.
Right. So 3 targets, 3 very different types of communication, all happening pretty close together. First, there's Alberto. He's her fiancé and also a big name in this online community, a leader. And the confrontation with him, it was public, recorded in this digital space he actually built.
Oof. Okay, number 2.
Second is Mr. Crinches. That's her lawyer for her divorce. Now, there was conflict there too, serious criticism actually, but it stayed private. It was handled through, the proper professional channels.
Right, formal dispute kind of thing.
Exactly. And third, we have Princess. That's the ex-husband. The sources describe him as, well, narcissistic and abusive. The communication there was very specific, very transactional, legal stuff.
Okay, so you've got the partner, the lawyer, the ex. Wildly different relationship.
Very different.
So let's unpack the main argument here from the analysis. It says the public blow-up with Alberto, the fiancé, was uniquely damaging. Way worse than the other 2 private fights. And I think that's where some people might pause, right? I mean, she's dealing with a narcissist, a lawyer who's gone AWOL. Wouldn't they be the ones you'd expect the most, I don't know, fury directed at?
That's exactly the question you have to ask.
Yeah.
And the analysis really digs into this. It argues it comes down to accessibility and powerlessness. It's not about saying her frustration wasn't legit. It clearly was. She was under immense pressure.
Yeah.
It's about how the conflict was executed.
The method.
The method, the channel, the choice. Why keep it professional, contained with the legal guys, but then go nuclear publicly against her partner?
Yeah.
That's what we need to understand. It's all tied up in stress, how it builds, and how these digital spaces can just capture and, well, immortalize everything.
Right.
Okay, so to really get why the Alberto situation was so bad, we have to understand the backdrop. What state was CG10 in? The analysis talks about this pervasive state of chronic stress.
Yeah.
Not just a bad day. This is ongoing high-level stress, like living under siege.
Yeah.
And that's framed as the necessary starting point for the aggression we saw. It built up.
Right, it wasn't just one thing, it was cumulative.
Cumulative, exactly.
Yeah.
Leading directly to, well, emotional dysregulation. She couldn't manage the feelings effectively anymore.
So it's the difference between, like, snapping because you spilled your coffee versus snapping because your whole world feels like it's collapsing for months.
That's a perfect analogy. It was a pressure cooker situation.
Mm-hmm.
And the analysis points to 2 huge external sources of this pressure, things she couldn't easily fix or confront. She was feeling extreme structural powerlessness.
Yeah, what were they?
First source, legal inefficacy. So she's going through this divorce, depends heavily on her lawyer, Mr. Crinches, but according to these documents, he'd basically just vanished. 4 months. No return calls, no emails answered.
4 months during a divorce? That's unimaginable.
Right. Think about the anxiety, the most stressful, financially draining time of your life maybe, and the person you're paying to guide you is just gone.
It's abandonment, professionally speaking.
It is. And it's not just inconvenient. It creates this profound sense of anxiety, frustration, and just sheer powerlessness. The system's failing her. Her representative is failing her.
And she can't just storm into his office and scream, right. There are rules.
Exactly. That's the crucial part. She couldn't get that direct, satisfying confrontation. Why? Because he's shielded. Professional boundaries, due process. You have to file a complaint, go through channels. So the immediate target of his very real anger was functionally inaccessible, blocked by the structure itself.
So the frustration just builds and builds. No release valve there.
No release valve there, which then gets compounded by the second major source, narcissistic entrapment. At the same time, she's dealing with the ex-husband, Princess, described as narcissistic, abusive. And he's apparently trying to railroad her into a terrible settlement. A shitty deal, as the source puts it, about assets, alimony.
Oh, man. Dealing with someone like that, it's exhausting.
It's often described as feeling like you're hitting a psychological brick wall.
Yeah.
They don't negotiate fairly. They stall. They use tactics just to inflict pain or wear you down. Pathological rigidity, the analysis calls it.
So it reinforces that feeling of being trapped. No reasonable way forward.
Totally. So picture it. On one side, the unresponsive lawyer, protected by rules. On the other, the unreasonable ex, protected by his own pathology. Both situations just strip away any sense of control or agency she might have felt.
Wow. Yeah, you can see how that pressure cooker idea really fits.
Absolutely. It's this convergence. Two huge, unresolved, high-stakes problems boiling over. And the real targets of that massive rage, the lawyer, the ex, the system, the unfairness of it all, they're out of reach, structurally or psychologically. So the steam has to go somewhere else. This is textbook setup for displaced aggression. The anger gets redirected.
Redirected onto someone accessible.
Usually someone emotionally close.
Yeah.
And accessible. Which brings us right to the venue for the conflict with Alberto. Because to understand the harm, we need to understand the space she chose to violate.
Right. The analysis calls Alberto's public X space a digital campfire. What does that mean? What was the vibe, the rules?
Yeah, that term is important. It suggests something specific. This wasn't just a random chat room. It was built deliberately on certain principles, almost idealistic ones. The foundation was radical inclusion. And Alberto apparently had this guiding philosophy. No opino, no juzgo, escucho a todos. Which means, I don't opine, I don't judge, I listen to all.
Wow. Okay. That sets a really high bar for psychological safety, especially online, where things can get nasty fast.
Exactly. It created a high-trust environment. And interestingly, it intentionally mixed the professional with the personal. So they discuss really technical stuff, cyber threats, security analysis, deep dives like this one.
But also personal stories.
Yeah, raw personal narratives, people talking about their struggles with PTSD, trauma, legal battles. Vulnerability was encouraged. It was part of the culture.
And the analysis mentions this idea of proof of love, not romantic, but like a commitment to supporting each other through struggles, mutual aid.
That seems to be the essence of it. It created this really strong social contract. You respect the professional expertise and you respect the personal vulnerability. You don't attack someone personally using information shared in trust.
So when that contract gets broken,
Especially by someone within that trusted circle, some will respect it, like CG10 apparently was too. The damage is way worse. It's not just a fight breaking out. It's seen as a betrayal of the entire community ethos, the very foundation of the space.
Okay, so I've got the background. Immense stress meets this really unique, high-trust digital space. Now let's get into the core argument, proving that CG10 actually could control herself when she needed to, because if she managed restraint with the lawyer who abandoned her and the difficult ex, it makes the attack on Alberto look less like losing control and more like something else.
This comparison is absolutely central to the analysis. It's where you see the contrast most clearly. It shows she had the capacity for restraint, for strategic thinking, even under pressure. Let's look at those other two conflicts again, the contained ones. When she was dealing with the sources of her actual stress, the lawyer, the ex, the legal system, she used very different tactics, controlled tactics.
Okay, walk us through the lawyer, Mr. Crinchus, again.
Right. So the communication with him, it was harsh, no doubt about it. The sources say she addressed his competence, the money drain, the mental health impact his silence was having. Serious stuff. But how did she do it? Through a formal complaint.
Ah, using the system's own tools.
Precisely. It stayed within the correct private professional channel, likely a detailed letter or email. She understood, it seems, that even though her anger was justified, ranting wouldn't help her case. She had to follow procedure.
That takes a lot of emotional regulation, doesn't it? To be that angry but still follow the rules.
A tremendous amount. It shows strategic thinking. She contained the rage to achieve a specific professional goal. This wasn't an emotional outburst. It was a calculated, formal action.
Okay, so point taken. She could be strategic. What about with the ex-husband, Princess?
Similar pattern, different context. With him, the communication described as purely transactional, laser-focused. It was about one specific thing, getting a shared asset, a caravan, sold. That's it. The language wasn't emotional, it was firm, direct.
And crucially,
Crucially, it was framed within the formal legal context. She told him, essentially, talk to your lawyer, keeping that necessary distance, maintaining the boundary between the personal mess and the legal process.
again, very disciplined, very different from just letting loose.
Totally different. It proves, the analysis argues, that CG10 absolutely was capable of managing these incredibly stressful conflicts through private, appropriate channels. When the goal was, say, legal progress or a logistical outcome, she could use restraint.
Which makes what happened with Alberto stand out even more starkly. The conflict there wasn't legal or transactional, it was relational. About him ghosting her, pulling away.
Exactly. And the sources even suggest his withdrawal Might have been linked to his own mental health struggles, which we'll get into. But fundamentally, it's a private relationship issue.
An issue that should have been handled privately.
Absolutely. But she chose not to. The defining move was taking that private, intimate dispute and dragging it into the public, recorded X space.
And that's the core of the analysis's verdict on harm, right?
Yes. That choice to make the private public, to use that specific venue, is seen as a severe, uniquely harmful escalation. Why? Because it deliberately threw away all the principles of containment, privacy, and boundaries that she just demonstrated she could uphold with the lawyer and the ex, even though those situations were arguably more frustrating in some ways.
Okay, but hang on. If she could hold it together with the lawyer and the ex, the ones causing the financial and legal nightmare, why lose it or choose to abandon control with your fiancé? Doesn't that flip the script? Doesn't it suggest the public venue wasn't an accident, but a specific tool chosen for a relationship reason?
That's precisely the interpretation the analysis leans towards. The disparity isn't random, it reveals the intent. With the lawyer and the ex, the goal seemed to be practical. Get the case moving, sell the asset. That required restraint. With Alberto, the analysis suggests the goal shifted. It became about enforcing compliance, maybe, gaining emotional leverage, venting that pent-up rage from elsewhere. The public venue became the weapon precisely because it inflicted a type of damaged public humiliation, loss of face that a private conversation couldn't. It turned their relationship into a public spectacle for maximum impact. So let's really break down the mechanics of this public ambush. The analysis is pretty blunt here. Moving a private fight into a public recorded space isn't just poor judgment. It's framed as a tactical power play.
How so? What's a tactic?
The main goal, according to this view, is to strip the target, Alberto, in this case of privacy and control. You put them on the spot, publicly. You use the audience, the community he leads, as social pressure. It's meant to force an immediate reaction, to coerce compliance.
Using his own community, his own campfire against him, that's harsh.
It is. And the harm isn't just the embarrassment in that moment. It's about creating a permanent digital record of a private vulnerability. That recording, that transcript, it exists forever now, searchable, tied to his name, his professional identity in that space. Digital shame doesn't fade.
And the sources detail how boundaries were just steamrolled. CG10 tried to justify using the public space, right? Claiming it was the only way to reach him.
Yeah, the only way that I can reach him was the quote, I believe. But Alberto immediately tried to shut it down, to de-escalate.
What did he do?
He offered a perfectly reasonable boundary. Said he'd call her back in an hour to take it private. That's standard practice, right? Professional, personal. Take sensitive stuff offline.
Makes sense. But she rejected that.
Publicly, flatly, with the demand, call me now. The analysis points to this as proof it wasn't really about having the conversation. It was about control. Immediate public submission to her need for attention right then.
Rejecting his boundary in his own space, that's a power move. Public humiliation.
Exactly. It showed her immediate emotional needs were taking precedence over everything. His boundaries, the community's comfort, his standing as a leader, everything.
And the listeners, the community members, they picked up on this.
Oh, yeah. The analysis highlights comments from observers. There was like a third-party validation that something was really wrong. People were asking, are we listening to a domestic dispute here? Someone else apparently said the public space was probably not the best space for this conversation.
Understatement of the year, maybe?
Right. They knew a line had been crossed. The safe space, the campfire, was suddenly a stage for a private drama. It didn't just hurt Alberto. It undermined the integrity of the whole community space he'd built.
No. Okay, this is where, according to the analysis, it goes from really bad to something else entirely. It crosses what's called an irrevocable ethical line. Because it wasn't just about their relationship anymore, it brought in a child.
This is the absolute crux of the ethical argument. CG10 didn't just air their dirty laundry. She weaponized incredibly sensitive information about a minor. Specifically, custody issues involving an 11-year-old child.
What was the specific thing she said?
She publicly challenged Alberto with this quote, loaded with private details.
Yeah.
Do you think that it's okay that you tell me that I have 5 minutes time to talk to my 11-year-old girl when they come after 2 weeks?
Wow. Just laying it all out there.
Think about what that one sentence does. It reveals the child's age, 11. It reveals specific, contentious details about visitation schedules after 2 weeks. It reveals conflict over communication time, 5 minutes. All deeply private, sensitive family court type information.
Put onto a public, recorded, permanent platform about a kid who had no say in it.
Exactly. That's why the analysis calls this the most consequential violation. The harm isn't just relational between the adults, it's irreparable harm to the privacy of a non-consenting minor. This isn't just gossip, it's exposing sensitive details about a child's life to the world forever. There are parallels drawn to legal concepts around public disclosure of private facts. Even if not illegal in this context, the ethical breach is profound and the harm lasting.
And again, the community reaction underscored this. You mentioned the co-host, Cindy, stepping in.
Yes, Cindy's intervention is presented as critical evidence. She immediately jumped in, saying something like, let's drop it just because I heard a kid involved, so yeah, let's not anymore.
Cutting it off right there.
Cutting it off. That immediate action to shield the child showed that, in the community's eyes, this was the absolute line. Whatever the fight was between CG10 and Alberto, bringing the child's private details into it was an unacceptable transgression. It marked the point where CG10's actions became indefensible within that community's ethical framework. Okay, so now we need to get into the why, what was driving this specific destructive behavior. The analysis points very strongly towards displaced aggression.
Can you define that for us clinically?
Sure. So displaced aggression happens when you've got all this intense frustration or anger or anxiety building up because of something, some external trigger or situation, but you can't actually direct that anger at the real source.
Like the lawyer who won't call back or the ex making things impossible?
Exactly. Those targets are inaccessible, or confronting them feels too risky or just impossible. So that pent-up emotional energy, that rage, gets redirected. It gets dumped onto a different target, usually one that's perceived as less threatening or simply more available.
And often that less threatening target is actually the person closest to you, right? Your partner.
That's the terrible irony of it. The intimate partner often becomes the pressure release valve, precisely because they are accessible. They're there. And the emotional connection means the aggressor gets a strong reaction, which can feel like a release. So think about CG10's situation. The chronic stress from the divorce, money worries, legal helplessness, it was immense. She couldn't effectively unload on the unresponsive lawyer or the immovable ex. The system protected them, in a way.
So Alberto became the target.
He became the accessible target for all that stored-up rage. The analysis suggests she directed the fury, meant for the sister, the lawyer, the ex, onto her fiancé.
Which explains why the attack seems so out of proportion. I mean, the trigger was him ghosting her, which is hurtful, but the reaction was extreme.
Absolutely. The reaction seemed totally disproportionate to that specific trigger. Alberto's withdrawal was just like the weakest point in the dam. The flood that came through was the pressure from everything else. Her outburst, the analysis argues, became this desperate attempt to regain some sense of control, some power, in a situation where she felt completely powerless everywhere else in her life. The divorce was disempowering her. This public attack was a way, maybe unconsciously, to feel powerful again, even if through destruction.
Now, it's important, I think, to distinguish. CG10 was clearly in distress, likely experiencing trauma responses herself. But does the analysis suggest this was just an uncontrolled emotional meltdown?
That's a really key nuance the analysis makes. No, it doesn't frame it as purely an uncontrolled outburst. While the underlying engine was likely trauma and distress, the method suggests something more. The deliberate choice of the public, recorded venue, that takes some planning, some executive function, and specific content she used targeting the custody issues, the child's details. That suggests a degree of tactical thinking, even amidst the emotional storm.
So it wasn't just random screaming, it was targeted.
It seems to have incorporated elements of psychological control, of manipulation. It wasn't just venting, it was using specific tools, public shaming, private information, to inflict maximum harm and gain leverage. This pushes it beyond simple emotional collapse into the realm of potentially abusive dynamics using tactics to coerce and control.
Which leads us straight into the next point, weaponizing known vulnerability. We have to talk about Alberto's context. The analysis is clear he wasn't just some random guy. He was known to be going through a really rough time himself.
Yes, the sources state explicitly he was dealing with severe mental health issues and emotionally being really struggling badly.
So his ghosting or withdrawal might not have been malicious, but actually a symptom, a coping mechanism.
Very likely. When someone's in that state, overwhelmed, maybe nearing emotional collapse, withdrawing or pushing people away can be a defense mechanism, an attempt to manage unbearable internal chaos.
And CG10 presumably knew this, knew how fragile he was.
The analysis operates on the assumption she knew, given their intimate relationship. And if she knew, then her specific choice of attack becomes even more pointed.
Using the custody details, questioning his role as a parent.
It wasn't just a general insult. It was designed, the analysis argues, to hit him where it hurt most, to strike directly at known, deep psychological vulnerabilities. That maximizes the emotional pain, the trauma. It's not just lashing out, it's using intimate knowledge as a weapon against someone already down.
The analysis uses this phrase, saying it shifts the dynamic from conflict, even bad conflict, towards an interpersonal power play.
Right. It stops being about resolving an issue and starts being about dominance and control. Using public shaming, using family secrets. These are tactics to coerce, to punish, to make the other person submit. It fundamentally breaks the trust that's supposed to underpin a relationship, let alone the specific trust built in that digital campfire community. It's using control tactics to manage her own feelings of helplessness from totally different parts of her life. So if we tie all this together, what's the ultimate bottom line here? The analysis lands on something quite profound. CG10's awareness of Alberto's severe mental health state makes her actions a fundamental breach of a duty of care.
Duty of care. That sounds quite formal, almost legal or medical. How does it apply in a relationship?
It's taking that concept and applying it to the ethical and psychological responsibilities we have towards intimate partners, especially vulnerable ones. When you know your partner is severely mentally ill or in a deep crisis, there's an implied responsibility, isn't there?
To offer support, presumably.
Right.
Or at least not to actively harm them.
Exactly. To provide support if you can, yes, but at minimum, to maintain healthy boundaries, and crucially, to avoid knowingly inflicting more harm, more acute stress. You don't pour gasoline on the fire when someone's already burning.
But that's what the analysis argues she did.
Precisely. By deliberately targeting him in that specific way, public, permanent, using the most sensitive secret she had, knowing his vulnerable state, she knowingly inflicted severe stress and trauma. This action, the analysis concludes, isn't just bad behavior. It's a severe breach of that fundamental relational duty. It elevates the conflict from displaced anger, however damaging, into a targeted psychological assault that specifically exploited his known weakness for her own emotional regulation, however flawed.
And when that kind of fundamental safety is shattered, especially so publicly and permanently, the outlook for the relationship must be pretty bleak. What does the analysis say about the lasting damage?
Yet the prognosis for any kind of quick repair is rated as exceedingly poor, primarily because the harm is permanent in a couple of key ways. First, there's the public, permanent humiliation. That digital recording, the transcript, it doesn't go away. It's a lasting monument to his shame, his vulnerability, right in the space where he was a leader. That creates a deep sense of hopelessness, a loss of standing that's hard to recover from because the evidence is always there.
And the second type of damage?
It's what's termed betrayal trauma. This isn't just being disappointed or hurt. When the person you trust most, your intimate partner, violates that trust so profoundly, especially by weaponizing secrets against you when you're vulnerable, it causes a specific kind of trauma.
Similar to PTSD symptoms.
Yes, the analysis draws that parallel. Hypervigilance, difficulty trusting anyone again, deep suspicion. Because the source of your safety became the source of your deepest wound. That rewires how you see relationships.
And just to hammer the point home, this all circles back to the comparison at the start. CG10 showed she could manage conflict differently.
That's the final synthesis, yes. She demonstrated the capacity for respecting professional boundaries with the lawyer, legal boundaries with the ex. She contained those conflicts. The fact that she chose not to do that with Alberto, that she instead deployed maximum public force, weaponized private details, and breached ethical lines. It confirms, in the view of this analysis, the targeted nature of the assault. The stress was the fuel, yes. But the choice of weapon and venue was about enforcing compliance, regaining a sense of power, and offloading her own unbearable feelings onto the most accessible, vulnerable target.
Turning the one relationship that should have been a safe harbor into the site of the most acute trauma.
Tragically, yes.
Okay, so given this assessment, the severity, the breach of care, Alberto's vulnerability, what does the analysis recommend moving forward? How does one even begin to stabilize this?
Well, the recommendations are pretty clear and follow from the diagnosis of the harm. First step, stabilization. And that means immediate separation. Physical and emotional space is critical for Alberto. He needs to recover from the acute trauma and focus on his own mental health without the threat of further attacks or triggers. CG10 must respect those boundaries. Any attempt to push past them would just compound the harm.
Makes sense. What about CG10?
Second recommendation, mandatory individual therapy for CG10. This isn't optional, according to the analysis. She urgently needs to address the root causes, the displaced aggression, the emotional regulation issues. She needs tools to handle stress, without resorting to these destructive, abusive tactics like public shaming and weaponizing vulnerability. And that involves deep accountability for her actions.
Which can be hard to face.
Very hard, especially when feeling attacked or stressed herself, which leads to the third recommendation.
Which involves the relationship itself.
Yes, conditional couples therapy. And the conditional part is key. This is only even a possibility after both have done significant individual work and stabilization. And critically, only if CG10 demonstrates real, tangible accountability for the breach of trust and the harm caused to Alberto and to the child whose privacy was violated. Even then, therapy would have to acknowledge that the foundation might be permanently damaged. Rebuilding trust after something like this, especially with that permanent public record hanging over them, is an uphill battle, to say the least.
So, wrapping this up, what's the big takeaway here? I mean, it's a complex, messy situation.
It is, but I think the core message is about how the digital age fundamentally changes conflict. Private pain can become permanent public shame with just a few clicks.
And the difference between managing a tough situation and causing catastrophic, lasting harm comes down to choices.
Choices about the channel you use, the boundaries you respect, especially when dealing with vulnerability, your own, your partner's, and crucially, a child's. The stress from her divorce might have loaded the gun, so to speak, but the analysis suggests the decision to fire it publicly at her vulnerable partner using their child's details. That was the fatal choice.
A sobering look at how digital tools can amplify our worst impulses under pressure.
Absolutely. Which leaves us with a really important question, I think, not just about this case, but for all of us involved in online communities, especially ones built on trust, like that digital campfire. If we know that chronic stress and feeling powerless can lead to this kind of displaced aggression, what responsibility do these communities have? What kind of systems, what kind of clear boundaries or internal ways to handle conflict should be in place before things blow up? How do we prevent these trusted spaces from becoming weapons used against their own members? That's the challenge, isn't it? Building proactive safeguards in a world where conflict can be instantly amplified and immortalized.